What happens when a beloved actress steps onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to be blindsided by a host with an agenda? In just 33 seconds, Denise Welch would go from smiling interviewer to the center of the most shocking outburst in loose women history, all because she couldn't help herself from making one comment too many. Rachel Shenton walked onto the Loose Women set that afternoon with a warm smile, fresh off her recent success, and ready to discuss her latest charity work with deaf children. The studio audience applauded enthusiastically as she made her way across the set, waving to the crowd with genuine warmth. She took her seat at the panel table, settling in between Nadia Sawalha and Jane Moore, while Denise Welch sat at the head of the table with that signature grin plastered across her face. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Just another day on Loose Women. Or so everyone thought. The applause died down and Denise shuffled her notes, that smile never wavering. She had that look in her eye, though, the one that regular viewers knew all too well. The look that said she was ready to stir things up, ready to push buttons, ready to create what she liked to call good television. "Rachel, lovely to have you here," Denise started, her voice syrupy sweet. "Now, before we get into everything, let me just say, congratulations on all your success. The Oscar, the acclaim, all of it. Must feel wonderful." "Thank you," Rachel replied, still smiling. "It's been an incredible journey." "I bet it has," Denise said, and there was something in her tone. Something sharp hiding beneath the sugar. "And your speech at the Oscars. That was something special, wasn't it? The sign language. Very moving. Very powerful." "It meant a lot to me," Rachel said carefully. She could sense something coming. Call it intuition. Call it experience. But she could feel the shift in energy. "I'm sure it did," Denise continued, leaning forward slightly. "The thing is, Rachel, and we've been wanting to ask you this. We've been dying to talk to you about your work with the deaf community. You won that Oscar. You gave that beautiful speech in sign language. Everyone loved it. It was all over social media. But some people have been saying, and I'm just putting this out there, I'm just being honest here, that it was a bit performative, wasn't it? A bit convenient. A bit calculated. Even," the smile on Rachel's face flickered for just a moment. The audience went quiet. You could feel the air in the studio change. Nadia shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing between Rachel and Denise with concern etched on her face. "I'm sorry. Performative?" Rachel asked, her voice steady but her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that." "Oh, come on, Rachel," Denise said with a little laugh, like they were just having a casual chat over coffee. "You know exactly what I mean. Don't play coy with us." "No, actually I don't," Rachel said firmly. "So why don't you explain it to me? Explain to everyone watching what you're trying to say." Denise's smile tightened, just a fraction. She hadn't expected Rachel to push back so quickly. "Well, you know," Denise continued, leaning back in her chair like she was just making casual conversation, completely at ease despite the tension. "You learned sign language for a role in a film, and then suddenly you're everywhere, talking about deaf awareness, doing charity work, becoming this spokesperson. Some people are saying you're using the deaf community to boost your own profile, to stay relevant, to keep your name in the headlines. I'm just asking the question everyone's thinking. I'm just saying what people at home are wondering." Rachel's jaw tightened. You could see her taking a breath, choosing her words carefully. "And which people would that be, Denise? Who exactly is saying this?" "Well, you know," Denise continued, leaning back in her chair like she was just making casual conversation. "You learned sign language for a role. Some people are saying you're using the deaf community to boost your own profile. I'm just asking the question everyone's thinking." "Oh, you know people," Denise said vaguely, waving her hand dismissively. "Twitter, social media, the forums. People talk, People talk, Rachel repeated slowly. Or are you talking, Denise? Are these your opinions dressed up as public concern? The audience murmured. A few people even gasped. You didn't challenge Denise Welch like that. Not on her own show. Jane Moore jumped in quickly, sensing the situation spiraling. I don't think that's fair, Denise. Rachel has been working with deaf charities for years, long before the film. I've seen the work she's done. It's genuine. It's real. Has she, though? Denise shot back, her voice sharpening. I mean, really? Has she really been doing this for years? Or did it just become convenient when she got the part? When she needed something to make her stand out from all the other actresses? A unique angle, you know? Something to make her special? Rachel's hands gripped the edge of the table. You could see the white of her knuckles. I don't need an angle, Rachel said, her voice low and controlled. I don't need a gimmick. I'm an actress who cares about accessibility and representation. That's not a marketing strategy. That's called being a decent human being. Rachel took a slow breath, composing herself. Her publicist had warned her about this, about Denise's tendency to ambush guests. But she'd thought it would be fine. She'd thought they were professionals. She'd been wrong. I've been learning British Sign Language since I was 17 years old, Rachel said, her voice measured and deliberate. My father worked with a deaf school in Manchester. I grew up around the community. I grew up seeing the challenges they face every single day. This isn't something I just picked up for a movie. This isn't some hobby I developed last year. This is part of my life. It has been for over a decade. Right, Denise said, and that condescending tone was back in full force. But you have to admit, the timing is quite convenient, isn't it? You get an Oscar, you get all this attention, you're on every magazine cover, every talk show, and suddenly you're the poster girl for deaf awareness, the perfect celebrity activist. Some might say you're exploiting these people, using their struggles for your own gain. I'm not saying you are, mind you. I'm just saying some people might think that. Exploiting? Rachel cut her off, her voice rising for the first time. Is that really the word you want to use? Exploiting? The audience murmured louder now. You could feel the tension crackling through the studio like electricity before a storm. Nadia put her hand on Rachel's arm gently, trying to calm the situation, trying to bring the temperature down before things went too far. Let's just take a breath here, Nadia said softly, her voice soothing. Maybe we can approach this differently. But Denise wasn't interested in approaching it differently. Denise smelled blood in the water, and like a shark, she was circling. I'm just saying what other people are thinking, Rachel, Denise continued, her voice taking on a self-righteous tone. You can't expect to come on this show and not get asked the tough questions. This is what we do here. We're not some fluffy morning program. We have honest conversations. We tackle the difficult subjects. We ask what nobody else will ask. If you can't handle that, if you can't handle being challenged, then maybe you shouldn't have agreed to come on. Rachel stared at her for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. Honest conversations are fine, Denise, Rachel replied, her jaw tight, every word carefully controlled. I have no problem with honest conversations. I have no problem with tough questions. But what you're doing right now, this isn't honest. This isn't tough questioning. This is you making accusations based on absolutely nothing, based on your own assumptions and prejudices. You don't know me. You don't know my history. You don't know the work I've put in. You don't know the relationships I've built, or the lives I've touched, or the hours I've spent learning and growing and trying to be better. You know nothing about me, except what you've read in a few articles and decided to twist into whatever narrative fits your agenda today. The studio was dead silent. Even the crew had stopped moving. Every eye was on these two women, locked in this battle of wills. Denise laughed. She actually laughed. And it was the kind of laugh that made your blood boil. The kind of laugh that dismissed everything that had just been said. The kind of laugh that said she didn't take Rachel seriously at all. "Oh, come on," Denise said through her laughter. "Don't be so sensitive. If you can't handle a little questioning, a little scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be in the public eye. Maybe you should stick to acting and leave the activism to people who can take the heat." "This isn't questioning," Rachel said firmly, and now there was fire in her voice. Real anger. Justified anger. "This is you trying to create drama where there isn't any. This is you manufacturing controversy because you think it makes good television. And frankly, it's insulting. It's insulting to me and to the entire deaf community that you would suggest I'm using them. That you would reduce years of genuine work and genuine relationships to some cynical publicity stunt." Jane Moore nodded vigorously, clearly on Rachel's side. "She's right, Denise. This has gone too far. Way too far." "Oh, here we go," Denise said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Everyone's so precious these days. You can't say anything anymore without someone getting offended. Everything's a microaggression. Everything's problematic. God forbid we actually have a real conversation about anything." "Maybe if you said things that weren't offensive," Rachel fired back, her voice sharp as a blade, "people wouldn't get offended. Ever thought of that? Maybe the problem isn't that everyone's too sensitive. Maybe the problem is that you're too insensitive." The audience actually gasped. Loud this time. Some people started clapping. A few even stood up. Denise's face went bright red, her cheeks flushing with anger and embarrassment. "Excuse me?" Denise said, sitting up straighter, her voice rising to match Rachel's. "I've been doing this show for years. Years, Rachel. I think I know how to conduct an interview. I think I know how to have difficult conversations. Don't presume to tell me how to do my job." "Could have fooled me," Rachel muttered, but it was loud enough for all the microphones to pick up. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Nadia tried again to intervene, her face pale with worry. This was spinning out of control fast. "Ladies, please, can we just take a moment and—" "No, Nadia," Denise interrupted sharply, not even looking at her co-host. "If Rachel has something to say, let her say it. Clearly she thinks she knows better than everyone else. Clearly she's got it all figured out. So please, Rachel, enlighten us. Tell us all how we should think. Tell us all how we should feel." Rachel stared at Denise for a long moment. The whole studio held its breath. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would Rachel back down? Would she apologize? Would she try to smooth things over? "You know what, Denise?" Rachel said quietly, but with steel in her voice. Pure, unbreakable steel. "I came here today because I was asked to talk about something I care deeply about. Something that matters to me more than you could possibly understand. Something that matters to thousands of families across this country who deserve better representation, better accessibility, better opportunities. But instead of having that conversation, instead of actually discussing something meaningful, you've decided to attack my character based on nothing but your own cynical assumptions, based on your need to create conflict where none exists." "I haven't attacked anyone," Denise protested, but there was defensiveness creeping into her voice now. "I've asked legitimate questions. Questions that needed to be asked." "No," Rachel said firmly, shaking her head. "You've made accusations disguised as questions. You've wrapped insults in the pretense of journalism. There's a difference. A big difference. And the fact that you can't see that difference, the fact that you genuinely don't understand why what you're doing is wrong, is exactly the problem. That's exactly what's wrong with shows like this." Denise leaned forward now, her voice dripping with condescension, with that superiority complex that came from years of thinking she was always right. "Well, if you're so perfect, Rachel, why don't you tell us? Why should we believe that you actually care about any of this? Give us one good reason to believe you're not just another celebrity jumping on a trendy cause for attention." The question hung in the air like poison gas. Toxic, dangerous, suffocating. Rachel's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard you could see her knuckles turning white. Her eyes were shining. Not with tears. With rage. With hurt. With a decade of frustration at having to justify herself to people who would never understand. And then she spoke. And when she did, her voice was shaking. Not with weakness. With emotion. With the weight of a truth she had carried for her entire life. "My younger brother is deaf," Rachel said, and the words seemed to echo in the silent studio. "His name is Ben. He was born deaf. I've spent my entire life, watching him struggle in a world that isn't built for him. Watching him be ignored in shops because the cashiers can't be bothered to look at him when he tries to communicate. Watching him be overlooked for jobs he's more than qualified for because employers see his deafness as a liability. Watching him be treated like he's less than, like he's broken, like he needs fixing, by people who don't know him, who don't understand him, who can't see past their own narrow-minded assumptions. So when I got the opportunity to play a deaf character, to learn sign language properly, not just a few signs for a scene, but fluently, to bring that experience to a wider audience, to show people what life is really like for deaf individuals, I jumped at it. Not for me, not for publicity, not for awards or recognition, or any of the things you seem to think drive every decision I make. For him. For my little brother Ben. For every kid like him who deserves to see themselves represented on screen as real, whole, complete people. For every family going through what mine went through. That's why I do this. That's why I care." The studio was dead silent. Deathly silent. You could have heard a feather drop. Jane Moore had tears in her eyes. Actual tears rolling down her cheeks. Nadia was nodding slowly, her own eyes glistening, clearly moved by Rachel's words. Even some of the audience members were wiping their eyes, pulling out tissues, visibly emotional. The camera operators stood frozen. The producers in the control room sat motionless. Everyone watching, both in the studio and presumably at home, had just witnessed something raw, something real, something that couldn't be scripted or manufactured. Denise, for once, seemed at a loss for words. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked like she might actually apologize. For just a second, it seemed like she might realize what she'd done, might understand the pain she'd caused with her baseless accusations. But only for a moment. "Well," Denise finally said, and you could see her trying to regain control of the situation, trying to save face. "Why didn't you say that earlier? Why didn't you lead with that?" The question was so absurd, so tone-deaf, that several people in the audience actually groaned out loud. Rachel looked at Denise like she was seeing her clearly for the first time. Really seeing her. And what she saw clearly disgusted her. "Because I shouldn't have to," Rachel said, and her voice was breaking now. Really breaking. "Because I shouldn't have to justify my entire life story to you. Because my brother's existence, his disability, his struggles, they're not some card I play to win arguments. They're not ammunition in a debate. They're not a trump card I pull out when someone questions my motives. He's a person, a real person with a real life. And using his story, using his pain, to defend myself against your baseless attacks, that feels wrong. That feels exploitative. Which is ironic, considering that's exactly what you've been accusing me of. Because I shouldn't have to justify my entire life story to you," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "Because my brother's existence isn't some card I play to win arguments. Because this should have been a conversation about raising awareness and helping people, and not about me having to defend myself against baseless attacks. Because this should have been a conversation about raising awareness and helping people," Rachel continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "About discussing the real issues facing the deaf community. About talking about accessibility in schools and workplaces. about celebrating progress while acknowledging how much work still needs to be done. But instead of any of that, it turned into me having to defend myself against baseless attacks, having to prove that I'm a good person, having to justify why I care about something that should be self-evident. And honestly, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people like you who think asking cruel questions makes you brave, who think being deliberately provocative makes you interesting, who confuse bullying with journalism. I think you're being a bit dramatic, Denise said, and you could hear the defensiveness creeping into her voice like ivy. She was losing control of this interview, losing control of her show, and she knew it. A bit over the top, don't you think? Dramatic, Rachel repeated, and there was incredulity in her voice. Pure disbelief. You just spent the last 10-15 minutes accusing me of exploiting disabled people for personal gain. You questioned my integrity, my motivations, my character, everything I've worked for. You made me talk about one of the most personal, painful parts of my life on national television just to prove I'm not some opportunistic fraud. And now you're telling me I'm being dramatic for being upset about it? And for having the audacity to be hurt by your words? Jane Moore spoke up again, her voice firm and unwavering. Denise, you need to apologize. Right now. This has gone way, way beyond acceptable. Way beyond any kind of professional behavior. I'm not apologizing for doing my job, Denise snapped back, and now the mask was really slipping. The pleasant television host facade was cracking, revealing something uglier underneath. My job is to ask difficult questions, to challenge our guests, to not just accept everything at face value. Your job is to interview people, Jane shot back, her tone harder than anyone had ever heard it. Not to bully them, not to make unfounded accusations, not to attack them personally. Oh, so now I'm a bully? Denise said, throwing her hands up in exasperation. This is ridiculous. And this is absolutely ridiculous. I ask a few pointed questions, and suddenly I'm the villain? Give me a break. A few pointed questions? Rachel's voice was dangerously quiet now. Is that really how you see this? Is that genuinely how you're choosing to frame what just happened? Yes, Denise said defiantly. Yes, it is. And if you can't handle that, if you can't handle being questioned, then frankly, you shouldn't be in the public eye. That was it. That was the final straw. You could see it in Rachel's face. The moment she decided she was done. The moment she decided that no amount of publicity or career advancement was worth sitting in that chair for one more second. You know what is ridiculous? Rachel said, and her voice was calm now. Eerily calm. The calm before a storm. This whole situation, this whole toxic, manufactured drama. I came here in good faith. I wanted to talk about something important. Something that could actually help people. And instead, I've been ambushed by someone who clearly decided before I even walked in here what narrative she wanted to spin. What story she wanted to tell. You didn't bring me on this show to have a conversation. You brought me on to tear me down. To create drama. To get your ratings bump. Rachel stood up from her chair. The sudden movement made everyone jump slightly. The entire studio seemed to gasp as one. This wasn't done. Guests didn't stand up. Guests didn't walk away. Not on Loose Women. Not on any show. But Rachel was standing, and she was reaching for her microphone, and everyone could see exactly what was about to happen. Sit down, Rachel, Denise said, trying to sound authoritative. We're not finished. Oh, we're finished, Rachel said, reaching up to unclip her microphone. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected like this. Not by you. Not by anyone. Rachel, please, Nadia said gently, reaching out. Don't go. Rachel looked at Nadia, and her expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Nadia. You've been lovely. Jane, you too. But I can't do this. I won't do this. Denise stood up now too, her face flushed. If you walk off this set, You'll never work in television again. I'll make sure of it." The threat hung in the air like a thundercloud. The audience gasped again, louder this time. You could see the shock on Jane and Nadia's faces. Rachel actually laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Is that supposed to scare me? You think you have that much power? Let me tell you something, Denise. I don't need television. I don't need this show. I definitely don't need you. But those kids I work with, they need people to stand up for them. They need people who won't back down when bullies try to intimidate them. So if standing up to you means I never work in television again, then so be it." "You're making a huge mistake," Denise said, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. "The only mistake I made was coming here in the first place," Rachel replied. She finished unclipping her microphone and set it down on the table with a decisive click. The sound echoed through the silent studio. "Rachel, wait," Jane said, standing up as well. "You don't have to leave. We can sort this out." "There's nothing to sort out, Jane," Rachel said, shaking her head. "Some people are just committed to misunderstanding you. And I'm done trying to explain myself to people who have already made up their minds." She turned to the audience, many of whom were watching with their mouths open. "I'm sorry you had to see this," Rachel said to them directly. "I hope you'll look into the work being done for the deaf community. There are amazing organizations out there doing incredible things. Don't let this," she gestured vaguely at the table, "distract from what really matters." Then she turned and started walking toward the exit. Denise called after her, "You're being childish, Rachel, running away like a spoiled brat." Rachel stopped. She didn't turn around, but she stopped. For a moment, it looked like she might come back, might give Denise one final piece of her mind, but instead, she just shook her head and kept walking. The cameras followed her all the way to the studio door. You could see her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the handle. Then she pulled it open and walked through, letting it swing shut behind her with a final, definitive thud. Back at the panel, chaos erupted. The audience was buzzing, some people shouting, some applauding. Nadia had her head in her hands. Jane was staring at Denise with an expression of pure disbelief. "Well," Denise said, trying to regain control, trying to act like this was all part of the plan. "I suppose some people can't handle real conversations." "Real conversations?" Jane said incredulously. "Denise, you just bullied a guest off the set. You threatened her career. What is wrong with you?" "I didn't bully anyone," Denise protested. "She's just too sensitive." "Too sensitive?" Nadia finally looked up, and there were tears of frustration in her eyes. "She told you about her brother. She explained everything, and you still couldn't just apologize. You had to keep pushing." "I don't have to apologize for anything," Denise said stubbornly. "Yes, you do," Jane said firmly. "And if you can't see that, then you're even more deluded than I thought." The producer's voice crackled in their earpieces, telling them to go to commercial. Denise tried to do her usual smooth transition, but her voice was shaking. The smile she forced onto her face looked more like a grimace. As the commercial break started and the cameras cut away, you could see Denise finally letting the facade drop. She looked shaken, rattled, like maybe, just maybe, what she was starting to realize what she'd done. But by then, it was too late. Rachel Shenton was gone. The damage was done, and everyone watching, both in the studio and at home, had seen exactly who was in the wrong. Back at the panel, the tension was unbearable. Nadia sat with her head in her hands. Jane stared at Denise with a look that said everything without saying anything at all. "Well," Denise said, her voice hollow, trying one last time to save face, "I suppose some people just can't handle honest discussions." Nobody responded. The silence said more than any words could. The confrontation had lasted barely 15 minutes. 15 minutes that proved one simple truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to accept mistreatment, even when everyone expects you to stay quiet. So Rachel Shenton had walked onto that set as a guest. She walked off with her dignity intact, leaving behind a host who had revealed exactly who she was when given the power to tear someone else down. And that was a lesson everyone watching would remember long after the cameras stopped rolling.